when we're seeing so much more representation within media, when we're seeing it in all of these other different kinds of places, where we have a Black woman as vice president, we have like a lot of different places that we've seen growth and representation. What is it about that kind of representation that like awakens something in folks that they start to respond back in such a negative way?
Well, that's $1 million question, right? But I mean, we know why to some degree, which is that representation, even if it's one more than the token, then it's a threat, because it's not what we were prescribed. We were told there can only be one of you, and now there are too many of y'all showing up. And so for the people for whom that was the permission that we were given, especially with Trump, right? We were seeing in the literature, especially for the people who are doing this research, the psychology research, that significantly negatively impacted our discourse. And that's not just something that people are saying, right? We're actually able to show this. And what he was saying is like, these people shouldn't be here. Y'all were asleep. And look how many Black people are over here. Look how many Mexican people are over here. Like, and he was basically stoking a fire that was already there. Even though we know that this kind of bigotry and racism and xenophobia and fill in the blank hurts everyone. It hurts everyone. But that doesn't matter if there is the illusion of I'm losing power somehow, because there are more of y'all here than they should be. And that's what's been stirred up in people, even though the reality is that most of us suffer when there's this kind of backlash to representation.
I'm also kind of thinking about, you know, I feel like we often have the conversation, this conversation around representation, and we talk about the kind of community or broader social response to representation, i.e. all of those examples Jarrett already listed. I'm also thinking about one of the comments that I believe you've also made before in writing to the show is about the cost of representation, or like being that person for the actual person who is it, right? So I think of, you know, the cost that it has been for Laverne to be the face of transgenderism in America, and or the cost of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, right, being the first Black, you know, president and first lady. The cost that it might come for LaFonza Butler to be the first Black lesbian, first woman of color, queer woman of color, if I'm not mistaken, in the Senate in that position. And then now, right, if she decides to run for that position, to then be up against Miss Mama's, what's Miss Mama's name, Jarrett?
Oh, honey, you host What a Day, not me. I don't be in the news now.
The one who's here in California and is running for that position that they wanted. Anyway, y'all know who I'm talking about. Y'all know who I'm talking about out there in the streets. I forget her name. Not Karen. Karen's the mayor, not Karen. The other older Black woman. Anyway, it don't matter. But, you know, she's running for that seat, right, for the election next year. But Gavin Newsom, for whatever different reasons, didn't appoint her to this temporary position. If LaFonza Butler, right, the first Black lesbian to be in the Senate, decides that she doesn't just want to hold the seat warm, and she decides that she wants to run to keep that position, then now she's pitted against this other Black woman, right, who has already thrown her hat in. And so this is a long way of me, you know, trying to get at the point of, you know, what the costs look like, how representation can be this negative thing for the person who actually has to walk that path, who actually has to blaze that trail, and what it can look like for Laverne, right, to usher in the transgender tipping point, quote unquote, in 2014, and less than a decade later, right, see the ways that the world and in particular here in the United States, you know, conservative legislatures, the Supreme Court, etc., are trying to tip us back the other way. Could you speak to just, I guess, kind of the impact that type of thing might have on an individual?
That particular What Was Said episode hit me really hard. Because I mean, ever since y'all started doing the show, I was like, this is so needed. And also, I had a feeling, but didn't quite know until it was said, especially by Palmira, like what y'all were receiving on your end, particularly you, Tre'vell.
Mm-hmm.
As you were doing your show, I was also starting my social media presence as well. And I started like my Instagram and all of that because I was seeing other clinicians online just sharing inaccurate information. And so I was like, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like if I'm sitting over here being like, oh, this is wrong, but I'm not going to say anything, it's never been in my spirit to just complain on the side and not do anything. But when I was first trying it, I'm speaking about myself for the moment before I expand, but I was trying all kinds of different things. Like I tried the snappy videos and all kinds of posts. And there was one that I did that was like a parody during Black History Month, talking about how, of course, they gave us the shortest month. And it was a joke. And also it was a commentary on how dumb it is that we have months for just representing specific groups of people rather than us thinking about this all the time. But people responded really negatively to that video. Like it just went around fast. And I was getting death threats in my inbox. Some of them from folks who are either active duty or veterans. And I remember sitting with that, being like, wow, like I'm actually trained to work with that population. So complex trauma, PTSD, like, and so to get that from people who I would normally be helping was an interesting sort of experience just because of this thing. And I actually took a couple months off because I was just like, do I want to do this? Do I have the stamina to deal with what it means to try to expand representation while also presenting accurate information and potentially being misunderstood, because that's always going to happen. But also some people are dedicated to misunderstanding you, right? That is, they don't want to understand you. It doesn't matter how much you explain yourself. And you have to figure out, if we're just talking about the general impact, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but is how can I show up as consistently and authentically myself while also protecting important pieces of me? How do I serve the people I want to serve and represent the voices I want to represent without completely sacrificing everything? Because at some point you have to keep something for yourself. And that's the only way you're going to survive being so public facing, especially when it comes to diversity and social justice work, because there will always be the people who are dedicated to misunderstanding you, and in some ways violently so. And the impacts are not just psychological, but also real physical safety. Worrying like, where, what address is listed online? If I have this in the background, can somebody find me? You hear all of these stories about people being tracked down by folks who just didn't like something that they said.